And we are back on Good Morning Kenya. I am Michael Migwe, and today we are talking about pre-El Nino preparedness for farmers. How prepared are we? What is the status of food security in the country as at now? And to help me with that conversation in studio, I'm joined by Julius Nyabicha, who is the program manager at Cereals Growers Association and a project manager at Farm Market Alliance. Bwana Julius, karibu.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael.
How are you feeling?
Good.
How is the month going about?
Every farmer in this country, not just farmers, but every Kenyan is now preparing for the El Nino rains.
Yes.
And we are trying to put together mitigation measures to ensure that we go through, and that at the end of the day, we have food on our tables. Okay.
To that person who does not know about CGA or the FtMA, briefly talk about the two.
CGA, Cereal Growers Association, is a non-for-profit organization that has been around since 1996. Yes. We basically bring together farmers, large-scale farmers, smallholder farmers, and so that we can be able to disseminate the important technologies for their production. We also link them to the market. At the end of the day, when farmers do production, they need to take their produce to the market, and we economically empower them.
Yes.
So CGA is there to bring together farmers, to empower them through the technology. You know, agriculture is an evolving field. Agriculture is technology savvy.
Yes.
And therefore we must keep on updating our farmers every day with new technologies. We must bring them together. We must make them understand that smallholder farmers, they have got more power, they have got more bargaining power when they come together. And we must also source for their markets. We must make sure that these farmers, once they do their production, they have the market, and ultimately they have money in their pockets. CGA is implementing a project that is backstopped by the World Food Program known as Farm to Market Alliance. Farm to Market Alliance is a very interesting project that is in 13 counties in this country. What we do, we all understand that in the space that we operate in Kenya, we do not have enough extension service providers. And therefore we bring together what we call farmer service centers, rural agripreneurs that we train, and they can be able to give service to other farmers. Through that, we also disseminate important technologies, most of them climate smart agriculture technologies, to these farmers to ensure that mechanization, for instance, is achieved, and all those technologies that mitigate against climate change are disseminated to the farmers. Once we do that, we also make sure that the farmers that do the production get their produce to the market safely and also with profit, because farmers are now agripreneurs. They're doing farming as a business. And finally, we are trying to put farmers together to ensure that they digitize their operations, because information is key. Most Kenyans, not just farmers, are suffering because of lack of information. And there is no better way to disseminate information than using the digital platforms. So we are doing what we call a farmer service center model. We are doing that through making sure that they have the right technologies. We link them to the market. At the end of the day, we try as much as possible to digitize so that they can have this information more affordably and more efficiently and more effectively. So that is, in a nutshell, that is Farm to Market Alliance, in a nutshell, and that is CGA. The Farm to Market Alliance, we are operating in 13 counties, in Migori, in Homa Bay, in Kisumu, in Busia, in Bungoma, Siaya. We are in Kakamega, we are in Elgeyo Marakwet, we are in Naroko, we are in Nakuru, we are in Nyandarua, in Meru, as well as in Tharaka Nithi, those 13 counties. And soon we are expanding to other counties, but our services are available to any other farmer in this country, because we always have what we call spillover effects.
Now, let's talk about preparedness. What is the importance of preparedness to any farmer who is listening or watching this program right now?
Any farmer must prepare. And sometimes we do not get optimum production. We do not get optimum benefits from our farming activities, from agribusiness activities, because of lack of preparedness. Because just like any other business, farming is a business, agribusiness, that's what we call it. And actually we're now trying to avoid the use of farming. We call it agribusiness, because anybody that goes to the farm wants to do the farming, either to put food on the table or to ensure that gets some income out of that activity.
Yes.
And therefore, preparedness is extremely important. One, farmers must sit down and reflect on what they need in terms of resources.
Yes.
Land is a key factor in agribusiness, in crop production, or in farming, or in livestock production. So we must have appropriate land. The farmer must have resources in terms of capital on what it's going to do. The farmer must take stock of the weather conditions, the climate. The farmer must take stock of equipment that he will require,
yes.
and the farmer must also take stock of where this is going to sell the produce after the production.
Yes.
So all these, along this value chain, until the farmer has money in his pocket, that's when you can call this an agripreneur. And that's the preparedness we're talking about. For instance, what is pertinent at the moment is the fact that we are about to face the El Nino rains.
Yes.
How are our farmers prepared? There are those areas farmers are supposed to plant. There are those areas farmers have already gotten to the harvesting period, and this is the most critical one. That farmers must make sure that they do not lose the produce that they've invested so much in when it comes to post-harvest losses because of the long rains, because of the El Nino rains.
Yes.
And therefore, together as the private sector, the government, we must come together as stakeholders to ensure that we have proper mitigation measures to cushion the farmers against losses during harvesting, during transport, during storage, during processing, until the farmer has food, until the consumer has food on the table.
Yes.
So that's the preparedness we are talking about.
Yes.
For instance, right now, as a Farm to Market Alliance,
yes.
a CGA,
yes.
we have put in place measures to ensure that we disseminate important bulk SMS messages
yes.
to farmers in various parts of this country to warn them against the El Nino rains. In those areas where we shall be having rains, we shall want them in good time.
Yes.
It's not just warning, it's also putting together measures. For instance, if we know farmers in North Rift, farmers in Trans Nzoia
yes.
are harvesting,
yes.
and the rains are coming, what do? You must avail threshers, you must avail dryers, you must avail proper transportation facilities, you must avail proper storage facilities, so that at the end of the day, it's not just disseminating information, but it is disseminating information accompanied by solutions. And solutions means you have to partner,
yes.
so that you can have the proper equipment. If it's dryers, you have dryers.
Yes.
I'm glad to say that I've heard the government is going to disseminate a number of dryers
yes.
in these areas. But then information must be available so that we know if the government, for instance, is going to disseminate 40 dryers,
yes.
where are these dryers going to be? A lot of our people are suffering because of lack of information. And this is the information that we want to avail. And that's why I said in Farm to Market Alliance, we have a pillar known as digitization. The moment you do digitization, it means that information can travel faster, can travel to the intended recipient, and at the end of the day, there is efficiency, there is effectiveness in this in the information that is being disseminated.
Yes.
So that is critical. So that information has to be there, and that information cannot be delivered by the government alone. The government might provide the threshers, but who is going to give the information?
Yes.
It is upon us, the private sector, the government, and anybody that in the agricultural space
yes.
to give this information, to provide it, and to make sure that it reaches the intended recipients, the farmers who are harvesting,
yes.
so that they can be able to use this equipment.
Yes. Now, let's talk about food production in the country. Given that the country experienced rains this year, and might I say torrential ones. Now, what, in your own opinion, what is the status of food production in the country as at now?
I must thank the government first,
yes.
because of the subsidized fertilizer, which has boosted
yes.
the food production in this country.
Yes.
We expect our target was to have 44 million metric ton, 44 million bags of maize harvested,
yes.
which is almost, not sufficient,
yeah.
but almost there. So that is a good gesture. But the question that you must ask yourself, yes, we might have sufficient food today.
Yes.
But shall we have the same sufficient food tomorrow? After 5 months, after 6 months? Because our production cycle is 1 year,
Yes.
it's 12 months.
Yes.
So if we have food that is enough today,
Yes.
what we must, as Kenyans, what we must ask ourselves, how do we process this food?
Yes.
How do we store this food so that the same food is available in the same quality
Yes.
in another 5-6 months, in
Yes.
another 1 year, so that we can be able to feed our people?
Yes.
So we might have enough food, yes, but if we do not do what we call proper post-harvest management,
Yes.
then we will not have the food.
Yes.
So our focus should now shift to post-harvest management of this food. How do we transport our grain? I was in Kitale last week,
Yes.
and I saw how farmers are struggling to not only harvest,
Yes.
but to do threshing,
Yes.
but to do drying. So how do we avail dryers so that farmers can be able to dry their maize and store it? How do we make sure that the storage facilities are proper, disinfected, and we have enough storage facilities? How do we make sure that the National Cereals and Produce Board that buys from the farmers is up to the task, buying in good time, ensuring that this is properly stored? How do we make sure that NCPB not only focuses on buying, but also goes a notch higher to ensure that these farmers are able to mitigate against the food losses?
Yes.
This country loses about 30% of grains and pulses. After production, 30%. Let me give you a quick math.
Yes.
If we are producing about 44 million bags of maize,
Yes.
a bag is about 5,000, 6,000.
Yeah.
We are talking about an industry, maize alone, which is about 240 billion. If you lose 30%, that brings you to about 70 to 8 billion.
Wow.
Can you imagine that the country is losing 70 to 8 billion Kenya shillings? Billion Kenya shillings.
That's a lot of money.
As post-harvest, poor post-harvest management.
Yes.
A farmer that has invested heavily in terms of inputs, a resource-poor farmer that has been able to produce and now is losing 30%. Those are the measures that we must take into account, both the private sector as well as the government, to ensure that we don't lose the 30% that we lose.
Which all boils down to storage.
It boils down to storage, it boils down to technology. Let me give you some historical perspective.
Okay.
When we grew up, there is what we used to call the traditional granary,
Yeah.
where you used to store our maize, even without shelling. That's where we used to store our maize. But then it came with its fair share of challenges, that the maize would be attacked by animals, rodents, and it could be stolen.
Yeah.
The weather conditions, when it's very wet, the maize would get wet. And we moved now to the bags. Once we moved to the bags, then we discovered we still have weevils. We still have other small animal insects,
Yes.
affecting the maize. And then we moved to the pesticides. Then we discovered the pesticides, one, are expensive. Two, the pesticides are laborious, because if you're going to store your maize, for instance, for 1 year,
Yes.
then you have to apply the pesticide probably 3-4 times.
Yes.
And you have got to remove your maize from the store to 100 bags and do that over and over again. And then thirdly, and most important, we discovered that the pesticides are not safe for human use. Sometimes we do not follow the instructions. At the end of the day,
Yes.
the level of cancer is increasing in this country because of what we consume.
Yes.
Now we moved to what we call hermetic storage. This is where we are. This is the current storage that we have. Hermetic means airtight.
Yes.
It means that you do not need to use the chemicals. You can have your maize in a bag that is airtight. Once it's inside there, there is no insect that can survive in an airtight condition.
Yes.
And therefore you can be able to store that. You can have it in plastic drums, you can
Yes.
have it in metal silos, you can
Yes.
have it in cocoons, you can have it in hermetic bags, which are all over in this country. That's where we are.
Yes.
Unless our farmers understand that we have this technology and this is what is effective, how will they know and how will they be able to use some of these technologies? So I've just given you
Yes.
a very simple and the short historical perspective on our storage, on our storage journey.
Yes.
This is where we are.
Yes.
But how readily available do we have this?
Yes.
How do we come together? How do we ensure that every single farmer uses this for health?
Yeah.
And also to ensure that the produce does not lose quality, the quantity is maintained.
Yes.
There is something else that most Kenyans do not understand, that what we have what we call hidden hunger.
Yes.
Hidden hunger is when you consume food in plenty, you think that you are consuming, but nutritionally there is no value. For instance, if you consume maize that has been weevilled, that has been attacked, that has been infested by insects, the best part of that maize has already been consumed. So what you are consuming is just a shell. Okay?
Yeah.
And then we have the worst that is hidden, known as aflatoxin.
Aflatoxin, yes.
Aflatoxin is so serious because you cannot see aflatoxin with your eyes.
Yes.
You can't smell it. You can't taste it. So you must follow the procedure for you to avoid aflatoxin.
Yes.
Many people ask why. Sometimes you go to the bread basket areas of this country, counties of this country, and then you get stunted children, malnutrition. It is because there is enough food, yes, but if the food is contaminated with aflatoxin, the nutrients in that food do not make their way to the human body, especially the children. So you'll see children that are stunted in a bread basket area. You ask yourself, why do we have malnutrition in these areas when there is so much food? The food is in plenty. But it's not clean food for human consumption. It's food that has been contaminated by aflatoxin. Aflatoxin is so bad, especially to the children, to the toddlers. They get stunted, and you know, the moment you see a human body is stunted, even the human brain is stunted.
Yes.
So that's why we have this problem, and we must start having this conversation with the Kenyans and tell them, and disseminating this important information that this is indeed what we need to do.
Yes.
We have aflatoxin.
Yes.
So in terms of post-harvest losses, we have many losses. You lose in terms of weight, you lose in terms of nutrition, you lose in terms of quality, you lose in terms of commercial value, and you lose 100% when it is aflatoxin contaminated, because there's nothing you can do to that food. You cannot give it to animals because it will get back to you. You cannot probably use it for brewing beer. It still gets back to the human body. So you even incur an extra cost in disposing of, in destroying that food. That is how serious this situation is.
Now, when you talk about El Nino and preparedness, how can the government and farmers come together to ensure there is adequate and comprehensive preparations before the rain start pounding?
Let me bring something to the fore that I've been thinking about.
Yes.
When you look at the Ministry of Health, that is what we call Community Health Volunteers, CHVs.
Yes.
Those are the last mile service providers.
Yes.
If you look at the Ministry for Interior, we have the Nyumba Kumi. When you come to the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries Development, we need to have a deliberate conversation and start thinking on how we have the last mile service providers akin to the Nyumba Kumi, akin to the community health volunteers. Why do we say so? We say so because if you look at it critically, the extension service providers through the Department of Agriculture that's devolved to the counties, they do a wonderful job, but they are not enough. The counties where we operate in, we work with them very closely, but they are not enough. And that is the reason why Farm to Market Alliance as a project, we came up with a model we call the Farmers Service Centers, so that we can pick the lead farmers and not only turn them into opinion leaders and providing extension services to the farmers, but we can turn them to agripreneurs so that they can have multiple income streams. Today, if it's planting time, this Farmer Service Center is connecting the farmer to the right farm inputs. And through that is getting a commission from the farm input suppliers. When it comes to during harvesting time, the same farmer is now linking this the same farmer service center is now linking the farmers to the market. When it comes to production, the farmer service center is now linking to mechanization and technologies.
Yes, we'll be talking more about that. Then do you think there is enough awareness on how farmers ought to prepare for the farming? Let's talk about farming preparedness, the practices. Is there enough awareness on the same?
Yes, there are too many. Actually, we have got too many players in the agricultural sector.
Yes.
Besides the government, and we know that agriculture is now devolved. Besides the government, we have got so many interventions.
Yes.
We've got so many private sector players.
Yes.
What do we need to do in this country?
Yes.
We need to make a deliberate effort to bring together so that the government plays that role of regulating the sector, the agricultural sector.
Yes.
We need to know what NGO X is doing, what services are being provided through that NGO, so that we do not concentrate on one area and leaving the other areas unattended.
Yes.
We also need to have preparedness in terms of information, putting together information that is coherent.
Yes.
Because if I'm giving information from this quarter, another institution is giving information, we need to put this information together and give it as a package so that farmers receive information not from too many quarters. It could be limited information, but information that addresses almost all the aspects of agriculture. For instance, as we get to El Nino rains, we are now tailor-making information messages. The message I send to Kisumu is not the same message I send to Nyandarua, because Kisumu could be harvesting, Nyandarua could be planting.
Due to different weather patterns.
Correct.
Yes.
And you know, sometimes some of the things that happen in this country, they leave you wondering. If you go to Kisumu and the Siaya, they produce rice. Believe me, 90% of that rice goes to Uganda. It goes to Uganda unprocessed before it's milled. So it's milled in Uganda. The Ugandan retain much of the byproducts. They sell the same rice back to Kenya with a profit. Why should we do? And the only investment that we require is probably a miller. We put a miller there, and we educate our farmers that the moment you add value, however small it is, you get something, you get a profit. So we should stop this. And then the government should make deliberate effort in terms of preparedness to ensure that our borders are not porous. If we do not have enough food in the country, there is no point of selling that food to another country. Yesterday I was listening to news and I saw some farmers say that the people buying the maize from their farms are not Kenyans.
We'll come back to that point, but we are going to take a very short break. We'll be right back. Good morning once again. Welcome back to the show. Now, before we went on a break, we were talking about the awareness on how farmers should prepare before El Nino. And you said, so if you can continue on that point.
Yeah, the most important is that we need, from the Met Department, we already have information. When El Nino starts, we shall have accurate and up-to-date information as to when it's going to rain where and how much that rainfall is going to be. And we also know how long El Nino is going to take. What we must now start investing in is on information technology and how to disseminate this information. We have been tailor-making as CGA, as Farm to Market Alliance project. We already started disseminating information that we expect El Nino rains, and therefore farmers should start preparing. Preparation in terms of those areas that farmers are now planting, they should prepare on what crop to plant. For instance, we know a crop like beans do not tolerate so much rainfall, and therefore farmers should be aware that if it's beans, they should be able to wait probably towards the tail end of the El Nino, and then they can do the planting. But we have other plants. We have got other crops that tolerate a lot of rain, and this is the time we should be doing it. If you're doing maybe planting tree crops, avocado and otherwise, fruit trees, this is the time that you should be happy and doing it. But in those areas where harvesting is taking place, they need to be a bit more careful, because I don't know of a crop other than probably tea. Most food crops, especially grains and pulses, are very sensitive when it comes to wet harvesting, and that calls for investment in technologies. I have already talked about dryers.
Yes.
The government has put aside some money, I know.
Yes.
And part of that money is going to dryers.
Yes.
If these dryers are going to be available, then we need to use information technology to understand where they will be. For instance, if you have a tool in a ward that's producing maize this week, the farmers should know so that they can take their maize for drying.
Yes.
If we move to another area, and these farmers should continue knowing that.
Yes.
So technology is going to be key, especially on threshing, drying, transportation, storage. That is going to be key. Even where we store the food that we have harvested, it should be a store that is well disinfected, that is clean, that is big enough, that can that is not leaking, because we shall have rains. This is the preparedness we are talking about. The first is information, the second is equipment, the third is to know what is happening at what time. Okay, that is key. That is important for us. If we do not have that kind of preparedness, then we lose it. And then finally, on that preparedness is on how do you bring the various stakeholders together? How do you bring the private sector together? How do you bring the farmers and their representatives together? How do you bring the government together? How do you coil message? How do you put together message that can be able to address all these issues? And maybe message that's universally agreed by all these stakeholders.
That has actually brought me to my next question about, are there collaborations between CGA, FtMA, and the government to enhance adequate preparations before El Nino starts?
Every county that we work, CGA works in 28 counties in this country. Farm to Market Alliance project that I manage works in 13 counties that I mentioned. Every single county where we work with the government. You cannot, the private sector is basically implementing the master plan for the government of the day. And therefore we must sit together with the government through the Department of Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries in those counties to agree on what we need to do. So we work together. Our collaboration is extremely good. All the meetings we have the government in those meetings. Even when we implement, we have the government to backstop and also to participate even in trainings on those meetings. So we work together. And also from the other players. For instance, if you're an NGO, you're implementing an intervention in production. You could be having another NGO that is implementing an intervention on marketing. So you must come together, synergize to ensure that at the end of the day, it's the smallholder farmer that gets the benefit and moves from point A to point B.
Now, let's talk about government subsidy. There was an issuance of subsidized fertilizer. Are we utilizing it effectively?
We have seen, first I must thank the government of the day, that for the first time there was very good subsidy program, and I think it trickled in most parts of this country. It can never be 100%, but in most parts of this country, the farmers felt it. They got the fertilizer, and that's why we have a good harvest this year. What we must do, I think, is now incumbent upon the government to start thinking on how to have the subsidy program to be private-led. Let the fertilizer producers, those who are in the business of fertilizer, start running this. Let the government implement in terms of regulation, in terms of taxes, and then we can leave this to the private sector, but make sure that the government has a watchful eye to ensure that this is happening, so that the private sector can run it, so that at the end of the day, we have a good subsidy program, but we also do not distort the market in terms of inputs.
Yes.
That would be my advice.
Yes.
It's a good program. We are happy.
Yes.
Farmers are happy that they have been able to produce, but we need now to start thinking on how to move it more towards the private sector. Make it more efficient, move it to the private sector, but the government remains there as the watchdog to make sure that it is being implemented, and the smallholder farmer is getting the benefits of the subsidy, not only in fertilizer, but we need to move it to seed. We need to move it to agrochemicals. We need to move it along that production value chain.
Now, last month, the month of September, we had the climate change summit here in Nairobi. And I would want to know how is the climate change affecting agriculture, especially in Kenya?
Thank you. A very pertinent question.
Yes.
When we talk about climate change, any player in the agricultural sector must be very worried. And that is why all the interventions that we have are what we call climate smart agriculture. All of the technologies that we have must address issues of climate change. For instance, I want to give you a few examples. El Nino rains are coming. We know after El Nino rains, we might have prolonged drought. What are we doing about the water that we shall be having? This is the time that we should be talking to farmers to do what we call water harvesting. This is the time that we should be constructing dams. And this is what, like Farm to Market Alliance, we have already started doing this. We are subsidizing the construction of dams so that we give dam liners. A farmer gives 50%, we give 50%. After El Nino rains, the farmer has water that can last maybe another 6 months, so that farmer can be able to do irrigated agriculture. That's one. Two, when we talk about climate smart agriculture, we are talking about a number of issues. One, we keep on turning our soils because we do disc plowing. We plow today. Next year we expose the soils to soil erosion, we expose the soil to disturbances. The soil microorganisms do not survive under those conditions. And even the water holding capacity of the soil is compromised. What we do as a project, as CGA and as Farm to Market Alliance, is now to bring in what we call a minimum tillage. You have a farm, you don't have to use a disc plow, you use a reaper, so that there is limited area where you can open up the soil, the other soil is intact. When it rains, however small that rain is, it will be retained there and your crop can move to maturity without a problem. And then now, the other areas you use what we call herbicides. When you look at this intervention at the end of the day, it's cheaper, it's cost effective, it's faster, and it's more profitable because any farmer must be an agripreneur, must do farming as a business. Two, we're now moving to mixed farming, where if a farmer is having a few enterprises in terms of crops, this farmer should also have a few enterprises in terms of livestock, because they play complementary roles. What we get in terms of manure from the animals goes to the farm. The remains from the farm, from the crops, go to the animals. We're also looking at diversification. If you look at a county where we operate in like Meru, Meru has very good diversification. Despite the fact that it does not have very good and reliable rainfall, they still are able to survive because of diversification of enterprises and the value chains. You have got this, you've got animals, you have got potatoes, you've got grains. That is where we want to move to. We are talking about agroforestry. Any farmer that is doing farming, we do not want to see tracts of plain land without a tree. We need farmers to start planting trees, like what is happening in Kisii, what is happening in Nyamira, what's happening in most parts of this country now who have started adopting. And if you look at those areas, there is sufficient rainfall because of the trees. We need to start now interrogating our systems. What do we plant? How do we even do the mixed farming in terms of crops? These are some of the interventions that we call climate smart agriculture. So climate is an important factor, and climate change is real. So it is us to adopt through technology to climate change so that we can be able to mitigate.
Yes.
And it was very pertinent for us to have the Africa Climate Summit in Nairobi.
Yes.
And I'm sure if we did not learn something, we ought to have learned something, and we must keep on learning something. Any intervention now, even in the government, is climate smart agriculture. And we can only do that through technology. We need to move to mechanization. And how do we do that? For instance, in Farm to Market Alliance, we've got what we call hubs. You might have one person owning a tractor in a village or even in a ward. But that tractor should be able, because you're talking about smallholder farmers, that tractor should be able to serve as many farmers, if not all, in that ward, in that village.
Yes.
You can only do that through a digital platform where there's somebody who can book and know, in this area we shall be having 100 acres ready to be reaped.
Yes.
The tractor can come and do that work, not the tractor coming to do reaping for only 1 acre.
Yes.
So that you can consolidate that, put it together, do aggregation of the land to be reaped, and then we have the tractor to do it.
Yeah.
You move to another area. These are simple digitization interventions that we can use to ensure that farmers in this country get the maximum from what we call mechanization, tools, mechanization, technologies in the country.
Yes.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, there is something we need to talk about. It's involving youth. We are living in an information age, and the youth are everywhere, online, everywhere. They are doing everything. Now, how can we rope in the youth to engage in agriculture and more so agribusiness? Because most of them want to do something that makes money. And agriculture, to some of them, may not be so much of an option, probably because of what is involved. So how can the youth be roped into getting into farming?
You've asked towards the tail end of this interview the most important question, the youth in agriculture.
Yeah.
Let me shock you that in Kenya, I think the average age of a farmer in Kenya is about 62. 62 years.
Yes.
That is worrying.
Yeah.
Agriculture is a science.
Yeah.
Agriculture is technology savvy.
Yes.
And therefore we need more youth to agriculture.
Yes.
What have we done as CGA? What have we done as a project, Farm to Market Alliance, in the 13 counties that I manage?
Yes.
Is to have a deliberate conversation with the youth, listen to them. Let us not ourselves that we know what the youth want. Let the youth tell us what they want. So we are, as a project, we're giving a voice to the youth. And they tell us, this is what we want, this is how we want to do it.
Yes.
So we have been doing that. We have brought together the youth so that we can be able to listen to the conversation that we have with the youth. Now then we can be able to tailor-make interventions for them to get into agribusiness. But in a nutshell, one, the youth want something that is technology savvy.
Yes.
They want to work on a platform. They want something that's digitized. And that is why, as a project, we have a pillar known as digitization. Because the youth, they want to have a platform there where they can be able to see the price of inputs, the price of the produce that they want to sell.
Yes.
The youth wants technology to do today. Farmer that is holding. That's not what we want to see. We want a farmer that is on a tractor, doing precision, and on a combiner. What we want to see. We mechanize our agriculture. It becomes a tall order for you to, unless we digitize our agriculture, in order for you to have the youth. Something else that we must do is to look at the crops that the value chain, are a bit impatient.
Yes,
if you want to tell a youth to grow sugarcane and wait for something that is not workable, to think something like horticulture. Yes. Like high iron beans that we promote as a project. Yes. You plant today in some areas, 75 days you've done. Can be patient for those 75 days. Cycle is done, money in the pocket. And
about short-term agribusiness practices.
That's where we need to start from. Because at the end of the day, if you discover that the youth is impatient,
yes,
and they need something, a quick fix,
yes,
get the quick fix. From there, they will learn and they will step into what we call fixes.
Yeah.
But mechanization,
yes,
and then short value,
yes,
processing, conversation, need to sit, listen to them.
yes,
through some of this. Like now we have a program where we are going to teach the youth on
yes,
a proposal how to do business plans, to loans from the bank. They can be able to do a proposal loan from the bank, because one of the in the youth is financing. They do not have want to give land to them. You listen to them, and you can now be able to address issues to do with the youth. And the move of having an farmer in Kenya at 62, probably we move it to 50, and ultimately
Thanks for gracing our show. We are very grateful for your insight. There you have it. We have been talking program manager and also the project to market. That caps the discussion on Good Morning Kenya. Mike Megwe, let's do